Hello there, my friends. Welcome to my channel and to my garden, Farming on the Rocks. If you're new here, my name is Marie and I'm from Kingston, Jamaica. Here I have a small container garden where I plant my fruits and my vegetables to support my family and to offer to my friends. Alright, I will be discussing today with you the advantages and, well, some of the advantages and disadvantages of growing your food in containers. Also some tips and tricks as to how to keep your container garden producing for you and producing effectively and efficiently. I'll also be providing a list of fruits and veggies that are best suitable for containers. Alright, so stick around. If you're thinking about starting a garden and you hope to use containers, at least you will know what you're up against and what to look forward to. Alright, so stick around with me and I hope you enjoy. Now, to begin with, space. If you have limited space, container gardening is excellent for you. This is planting vertically in containers. Now, this would have taken up a lot of real estate if you should be planting it in the ground. Creating something like these, and they do sell green stalks which you can use to plant your veggies in. So that's one of the most effective ways of using up containers to plant. Now I plant in both large, really large containers such as that tire, and smaller ones such as these 5-gallon buckets. Now, another advantage of planting in containers is the ability to move them, especially if you're living in a climate where it gets to extremes, either extreme heat or extreme cold. You can move your containers inside until the weather improves. So that's another great advantage of planting in containers. Pest and diseases. Pest and diseases deter a lot of persons or even discourage some persons from farming or gardening. Now, when you plant in containers, you're able to spot disease earlier and also prevent insects or pests from getting into your containers. Say, for example, these here, I elevated them so even if there are slugs and other insects that will live in the soil that will destroy your plants, it's difficult for them to get inside your containers this way, and you're able to check on your plants easier because they're off of the ground. So this is one of my pest control methods as well. Early detection, because you can't totally get rid of pests, but when your plants are in containers and elevated, you're able to minimize the amount of attacks on your plants. And that's one of the things I enjoy about planting in my containers, whether it's the larger containers or these smaller ones. Now, depending on where we're living, most of us, if not all, it's not perfect, the conditions that we get our soil in. But when you're able to control the environment that you plant your crops in, you know what nutrients you add to that soil, and whenever you water them, that nutrients is not easily washed out because it is contained in a container, and so the plants will benefit from all of the nutrients that you add to your soil. That added value, you will get it in the food that you're trying to produce. So that's another thing, you're able to manage the quality of your soil when it's contained in a container, whether large or small. So that's another advantage that I enjoy from planting in my containers. Water conservation. Now, if we are living somewhere where the soil is sandy, you might lose a lot of water watering directly into your soil. Having your containers, planting in your containers, the water will stay into that container longer depending on how much you allow out. You are able to control the amount of water that you allow to drain from your containers. So if your soil is sandy, you need very small holes, and if it is clay, it's very tight, then you'd need larger holes for drainage because you don't want to drown your plants, but you're able to have the water in your containers for longer when it's contained. Now, another great advantage of having containers in your garden or in your home is how aesthetically pleasing they are. They're great to look at. Instead of having just an open lot, you're able to add different containers. You can be creative. If you can afford it, you can buy pretty pots and pretty containers to make your surrounding very pretty and very light on your eyes. Now, I use recycled materials, so I have to try my best to place them in positions that makes them look good. You want to walk into the garden and look at your pots and your veggies. Alright, so that's another thing. It adds a lot of beauty to your environment depending on how you place your containers. Now, how many of us have parents and grandparents who would love to garden but just are not physically able to bend to the ground to do their gardening? And that brings us to my next advantage: accessibility. The ability to lift your containers, elevate your containers, so anyone, if you have a disability, you're in a wheelchair, whatever the case might be, you're able to do your gardening because it's at arm's length. You're able to lift your plants from the ground, elevate them so that you can enjoy your gardening no matter what your physical ability is. So that's another great advantage of planting in containers. Now, I've moved several times before living where I am living now. And one of the hardest things for me to do, I'm not sure about you, is to leave my plants behind. And that brings me to my last advantage for today. There are more, but for today, that's my last advantage, being able to take your plants along with you. If nothing, I'd like to know that if I'm moving from one home to another, I can pick up most of my plants, place them in a truck, and take them along with me. Another thing that I love about planting in containers. Before I go on to disadvantages, let me give you a few tips as to how I keep and how you can keep your garden producing at its maximum. Alright? My first tip is to water regularly. Because they're in containers, they do dry out quickly, so we have to water them regularly in order to keep the moisture level going, because without moisture in the soil, the roots aren't able to take up the minerals, the vitamins, the nutrients that the plant needs to produce. So keep watering on a regular basis. Maintain sunlight exposure. You have to ensure that your plant is getting adequate sunlight depending on the variety that you plant. Some do with less sunlight, but all plants need sunlight to produce. So ensure whichever variety of plant you're planting, it has exposure to that sunlight. Now, even though you're planting in containers and they need regular watering, they also equally need proper drainage. Or those roots, they need oxygen, they will drown. They need air, so the water cannot be locked on their roots, or your plants will literally drown. Another tip to consider is compatibility. When you're planting, ensure that the plants you're planting together do well together. Say for example, this corn patch here, you can plant a squash that runs vines out, or this, for example, is a cantaloupe. It will vine on the floor and do well, provide coverage for the floor and keeps the moisture in, and it will not affect the corn at all. So bear in mind compatibility when you're planting in containers. And you also need to choose the right container when planting. So corn, I would not plant a corn in a bucket or in a little container like this, because I need to plant them in clusters. They pollinate each other, so I need to have multiple in one container. So corn I would put in a tire or a raised bed, whilst I'll put cabbage or pak choy. Those can be placed in smaller containers like buckets. So choose your containers wisely when planting in them. Now moving on to the disadvantages. And this is where you choose whether or not you want to venture into container gardening. And for me, there are no deterrents because they're easy fixes. All right, so they might dry out easily. That's the first disadvantage. When you plant in a container, they might dry out easily. Easy remedy: water frequently. If it is that you work and you're unable to, there are so many ways that you can water your plants. Self-water, you may put containers in there and have them slowly watered while you're not able to. So that's an advantage, but to me it's not. Another advantage is you have limited space. So when you have a 1/4 acre or so of land, you're able to plant a lot more than if you're planting in containers like I do. But most of us plant in containers for domestic purposes, so that generally is not a problem. So that's another disadvantage, that it's not so much a disadvantage. Another one is they restrict the growth of plant, but that can also be an advantage depending on how you're looking at it. So say for the example, this basil plant, it won't get any bigger than this, but do we really want it any bigger? So for plants that you really want to restrict their growth, like berries and stuff like that grow really out of control, invasive plants, you plant them in containers and it will restrict their growth. So it is a disadvantage, but also can be an advantage in most cases, or in a lot of cases. In the case of this soursop, it definitely will not survive long in this container. For this soursop, you'd need like a wine barrel or something like that to plant it in, and then it will do just fine. But it's currently in a 5-gallon container. It's doing great at its size, but it will need to come out. So that's a disadvantage, as I said, but not so much that you cannot work around it, because I've seen persons grow mango trees in containers. So yes, those disadvantages for me, they are really not a disadvantage. Can't find much disadvantage to really deter anyone from starting a garden in containers. Now almost everything, every vegetable you can think of can be grown in containers. That's the beauty of it. Almost all vegetables can be grown in containers. The most suitable ones are beetroot, carrots, chards, chilies, zucchini, beans, lettuce, peppers, potatoes, radishes, salad greens, onions, tomatoes, cucumbers, so many, the list goes on, that can be planted in containers. It might require larger containers to plant fruit trees, but they can also be planted in containers. Right here I have a lime that is in a tire. Apples can be planted in containers, blackberries, gooseberries, pears, raspberries, red currant, strawberries, white currants. Almost everything can be planted in containers. That's the beauty of it. So consider starting one container at a time. Don't be overwhelmed by it. Plant a pepper, I always say. Plant a tomato in a container. A few lettuces. Start with a few lettuces and work yourself up from there, because once you start planting, you just want to continue. All right, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope I encouraged at least one person, I always say, to start a garden and plant your own food. Thank you so much for being with me today. Thank you for supporting my channel and supporting the movement of planting your own food. I appreciate each and every one of you. If you've not already subscribed, please consider doing so. Press that subscribe button and also the notification bell so you will be notified when I post my next video. Like and leave a comment, and remember, as always, share with your friends, because if you like my videos, chances are they will like it too. Okay, bye bye.